that you're there. Say hi. Our host, we have people who want to interact with you and get to know you. We don't have coffee online. Maybe if you give us, this is where online people, I drive them nuts. If you give us your name today online and your send a private message of your address. You might want to put that online. We'll send you a coffee card, okay? That's why they get frustrated. They're like, you just make up this stuff. Like, y'all like coffee, right? Most of you, other than me. So, it's great to be with you today as we do continue this series. It's been a really powerful series for me. If you missed any previous week, I'd encourage you to go check it out on either our podcast, which I know that's where a lot of us go, and you can get the podcast on your favorite podcast store. It's free, or a YouTube channel, Facebook too, but YouTube or podcast, probably the way to go watch or listen to it. It was 1954. They said it was not possible to ever happen. They said that the human bone structure, the human design would never allow it to happen or to be broken. The experts, the physiologists said it is not possible. It will never happen. We will never experience it in human history. The 4-minute mile. It will never be broken. No one will ever run the mile in under 4 minutes until May of 1954, a guy by the name of Roger Bannister did it. You can look it up for yourself. The internet doesn't lie. In this case, it does not. It is true. In May 1954, Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile. There was actually a side wind coming on that, or blowing on that day at about 10-15 miles an hour, and he still pulled it off. Because he knew where he was going. He knew what he wanted. Roger Bannister had a vision of a preferred future. Roger Bannister believed within his heart. He trained every day. He did everything possible to break that record. And he did. And I got thinking about Roger Bannister, and I got thinking about running, because I don't do it. I think it just makes no sense. That's why we have bikes and cars. But I got thinking about it, I got thinking about running, and I was like, we're all running somewhere, aren't we? We are. We're all in a race in some form, shape, or fashion. We are all going somewhere. Now, maybe we don't know where we're going. Maybe we sometimes just feel like we're running aimlessly, and we'll look at that and talk about that a little bit today. But all of us today here in this space, or joining us wherever you're joining us, are running somewhere. We're going somewhere. You might not know where you're going, but stay with me. Maybe by the end of this, you'll have a little bit greater clarity. But I do know this. Whether you're a young adult, maybe you're a young adult in here, you're a teenager in here, and you're wondering, where am I even going to school? What am I going to major in? What am I going to do? Why should I even remain pure? Because everyone else is just doing whatever. Why should I follow God when it seems like that's the unpopular thing to do? You're like, am I running the race smart? Am I actually putting myself in a position as a 16 to 30-year-old, I'll throw some of you late 20s into young adults. Okay, there, you're welcome. Right? Am I really going where I need to go? Or am I just kind of running aimlessly? For those of us maybe in the middle years, we're looking at the front half and saying, did I run that race well? Or maybe we're here today and thinking, I didn't know where I was going. I still don't know where I'm going. And you're in that position where you're like, there's more life left, and I want to run this race well. I want my life to matter. I want it to have significance. And maybe you're in this room today or joining us today, and you have a few more years under your belt. And you're asking yourself and looking back, and maybe with incredible regret, maybe with incredible joy of how you've run, but you're also saying, I'm not done yet. I'm still taking oxygen from this atmosphere. I'm still returning carbon dioxide to it. I'm not done. Retirement is not a biblical thing, okay? It's fine to retire. I'm not saying that. But we don't retire from life until I'm officiating your funeral, right? And so you're here today. You're wondering, man, I still have something left to give. I still want to make a difference. I still want to have impact. And you're asking, what's the next step look like? What's the future look like? See, it's something we all have in common, right? We're all going somewhere. Every day we get up. Every day we do something. Every day we lay on the bed at night. And rinse and repeat and rinse and repeat. And the question is, where are we going? What are we doing? Roger Bannister knew what he wanted. And that's one of the reasons he defied science, or so they thought. They defied human physiology, or so they thought. He defied even the elements that day of wind coming across him, and he still got to where he was going. I love this book of Joshua. I didn't realize how powerful of a series this was going to be until now we're in week 4 of it. Like, the book of Joshua, I'm just telling you, if you missed any of the previous weeks, and not because the sermons were any good, I don't know if they were or not, but if you missed any of the previous weeks, they all tie together. See, this concept of crossing over is part of running the race, right? This concept of crossing over is going somewhere. And there is so much depth to what occurred in the book of Joshua. I mean, it is unreal. I'm gonna review in just a matter of moments the last couple weeks and then where we're going today. But this is some vision stuff. This is some clarity stuff. This is some, if you and I actually take the truths that we see in here, because the Bible tells us that all of Scripture is God-breathed. The Hebrew word is ruach. Let's say that one out loud and loudly on the count of 3. Ruach. 1, 2, 3. Ruach. You're now fluent in Hebrew. And in the Greek, in the New Testament, it's called pneuma. It's where we get breathing from, like pneumonia. It's all God-breathed, and it tells us it's useful for teaching and reproof and giving clarity to life. And in the book of Joshua, we see some amazing things, absolutely amazing things. And if you and I put those to practice in our life, it's going to be a game changer. Today we're going to be in chapter 14 of the book of Joshua. If you have the Bibles in your row, it's on page 225 or something like that. You'll find Joshua and you'll go from there. If you have the app on your phone, we're going to be there. It'll be on the screen too. A little bit of background though, going back to week 1, that they had been wandering in the wilderness for almost 500 years by this point. They had been in captivity and slavery in Egypt. God had promised them this land, and they disobeyed, and they did laps in the wilderness, and finally they're at the precipice of crossing the land, just have to get over a river. And the river was at flood stage, and God did something amazing. You could read that in the first couple chapters. He pushed water 20 miles upstream, and they crossed over with God's presence going before them. And then they get into this promised land, and there's a large chunk of the book of Joshua that talks about the battles that they had to fight to take over that land and drive out evil and all that kind of stuff. And that takes us to chapter 14 today. And a guy by the name of Caleb. Caleb does not get much press time in the Bible. He doesn't get much press time even on stages in churches, but Caleb is one of my, if not favorite guys in all the Bible. Why would he be one of my favorite guys? Well, let's read the story. So we're going to be in Joshua 14. Verse 6 says this. Now the men of Judah approached Joshua at Gilgal, and Caleb, son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite, said to him, "You know what the Lord said to Moses, the man of God at Kadesh Barnea, about you and me? Because I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to explore the land. And I brought back a report according to my convictions. My brothers who went up with me made the hearts of the people melt with fear." I want to pause there. So you can read it for yourself in the book of Numbers, but there was the 10 spies who were sent to check out the land. There was 10 of them sent. Joshua and Caleb were 2 of those 10. And their job was to check out what they were going to be encountering as they went in to take this territory that God had promised to them. And they check it all out, they scout it all out, and they come back and give a report. And 10 of them give a report essentially saying, no way. Like, the cities are huge, they have walls, as we discussed last week. The people are big. No way, no how. They're like, we are not going in. We are comfortable where we are. We might be doing laps in the wilderness, and our life might be terrible right now, but I'd rather be terrible than go take on the promise. And we talked about that some last week, didn't we? I've had times in my life where I'm like, yes, it's absolutely insane to be in this stage of life where I'm miserable, but at least I'm miserable and content. To take a step of courage might be scary, right? And we do that. Humanity, church, has not changed. We think, well, we're smarter, we have more access to information, we've evolved in some form, shape, or fashion. I'm like, human beings have never changed from the time God created them until we are in October of 2023. 8 out of the 10, 80% came back and said, I don't want any part of this. Fear, trembling, scared, you name it, except Caleb and Joshua. So that's the context there. Caleb was one of the guys with Joshua 40 years ago. And he went on and said, I, however, followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. So on that day, Moses swore to me, the land on which your feet have walked will be your inheritance, and that of your children forever, because you have followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. That actually is not something that Josh or Caleb in the moment came up with. The cross-reference for that is in Deuteronomy. You can look up for yourself. Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 36. God says, it's not really optional. If you claim to follow me, then I'm looking for people who follow me wholeheartedly. And Caleb is just saying, I'm just doing what God told me to do. And I've been doing it for a number of years. Now then, just as the Lord promised, he has kept me alive for 45 years since the time he said this to Moses while Israel moved about in the desert. So here I am today, 85 years old. Is there anyone here in the audience today that's older than 85? Show of hand. Okay. You look like you're 70, so you're lying to us, okay? You ruined I didn't think we had, okay. Yeah. You're all young, and you're young, okay? We're all young. I am still as strong today as the day Moses sent me out. I still can't. I think you're lying. You're like 70. I am still as strong today as the day Moses sent me out. I am just as vigorous to go out to battle now as I was then. Now give me this hill country that the Lord promised me that day. You yourself heard then that the Anakites were there, and their cities were large and fortified. But the Lord helping me, I will drive them out just as he said. Then Joshua blessed Caleb, son of Jehoshaphat, and gave him Hebron as his inheritance. There's a lot going on here. Online guys, you told me, give you a warning. I'm moving fast. And I wanted to just unpack what's going on here, because this is the fruition of everything we've seen up until this point. Week 1, I said that the key that we looked at was that God's presence always precedes his promise. I need spell check here. Is that close enough? Presence? There we go. God's presence. Is that right? I spell it? See? I did go to college, believe it or not. All right, God's presence. It's always humbling, okay? God's presence. God's presence always precedes us. And we see this in the life of Caleb. How old is he when we read this? Shout it out. How old is he at this moment? 85 years old. How long had it been since he scouted out the land? Okay, so how old was he when he scouted out the land? You're all smarter than me, right? Yeah. He was 40 years old. 40 years old. He was 40 years old, 45 years of week 2, God's promises. God's presence always precedes his promises, but we looked in week 2 that God will never break his promise. He is who he says he is, and he's going to do what he says he's going to do. And we looked all throughout Scripture, and this is really fun, by the way. I would encourage you to do this. Just go, and you can Google, and it'll be halfway decent, but go and just type in God's promises in Scripture. Just type it in. And then we looked at God's names, the names of God. I'm going to do a series someday on the names of God because it's so powerful. It's game-changing kind of stuff. If God says this is who he is, this is who he is. And here's the thing, by the way. Just like Caleb did here, we can go boldly to God and ask him to fulfill his promises in our life. God's not a magical genie, so I don't want to treat it that way. But when we see how God operates, and when God says, "This is who I am Jehovah Jireh, the God who provides. I am Jehovah Rapha, the God who heals. I am Yahweh. I am." Those are promises that you and I can take to the bank. And so there's nothing wrong, church, with going to him and saying, "God, I believe in the God who heals, and I'm going to keep praying, and I'm going to keep praying for myself or someone else I know that they would be healed. They'd be healed physically, they'd be healed emotionally, they'd be healed relationally, they'd be healed mentally. I'm going to keep spiritually, I'm going to keep praying, I'm going to keep praying." Don't back away, because we see here in Caleb, he was not afraid to ask for God's promises to be fulfilled. And then last week we looked at this idea, this crazy idea of obedience. And what do we see about the life of Caleb? It says that he followed God, and the word it starts with a W-H, he followed him wholeheartedly. It's a very simple, straightforward word. It literally means with all his being, with all his heart. And so it's so stinking cool, and this is why everything kind of wraps together. This is why I love teaching. This is why I love opening up Scripture. This is why, because you see in a short period of time in the text, but it's over 45 years of what? Obedience. Actually, it's 85 years. But from the time here, now I just want to throw an aside out. Anyone, you don't have to raise your hand, but anyone in here been waiting a long time to see God do something? Any of you been praying for someone that you love come to know Jesus for a long time? Here's my advice to you today. This is worth the price of admission. Don't stop asking. Don't stop asking. We see this in the New Testament. God says when it comes to prayer, keep knocking, keep knocking, keep knocking, keep knocking. Because he's the God of the promise. Now, he gives humans free will. I get that. But he also is the one who took that river. Remember the river we talked about, that it was at flood stage? And literally pushed it 20 miles upstream. It sometimes seems like it's more impossible for him to change the heart of your husband or wife or your mom or dad or your kid. I get that, right? So it seems probably easier for God to move 20 miles of water upstream and set it up there for a few days and change the heart of someone I know. Trust him. Trust him. And today what we're looking at then is vision. Vision. Caleb knew where he was going. Number one, he knew who he was following. He knew who he was following. He knew where he was going for 85 years of his life. And in this context, for 45 years of not seeing God's promise fulfilled, he had to have times like I've had, and maybe you have had. God, when are you going to show up? God, I've been following you. I've been doing what you've asked. I've been obedient to what you've asked me to do. Are you ever going to come through? God will not break his promises. They might not look the way you and I want. They might not be fulfilled in the same way you and I want. But like I've said before, and I tell people all this all the time, in 2 weeks, we're starting a series on prayer. You're not going to want to miss it. It's going to be a 4 or 5 week series on prayer. It's going to be game-changing. But when it comes to prayer, I tell people when we don't see our prayers answered, there's only one of two things going on. Either God's quit answering prayer, or he's got something better in mind. And they always give me some of the same look. He didn't stop answering prayer, right? He might recalibrate that, he might reshift it, but he's going to answer that in a way that is even bigger or better than you want, or you can ever imagine. So I want to ask you a question. Where are you running? Where are you going? What did you walk in here today wanting to see God do some breakthrough in? Do you feel you're in a stage of life right now where you kind of are zigzagging? Roger Bannister would not have broken the 4-minute mile if he ran the race as a zigzag. I'm pretty sure on that. What do you think he did? Shoo, right? He stayed focused. He knew where he was going. Paul says it this way, in 1 Corinthians chapter 9. He says this, remember that in a race, everyone runs. You're all running in a race, and we said, using the metaphor today, we're all in this race of life. We're all started somewhere, called being born, and we're all going somewhere. He says this, everyone runs a race, but only one person gets the prize. You also must run in a way that you will win. I love to win. I love it. And you should be really proud of me today that I'm up here on the stage with a smile on my face. I'm a Penn State fan. Yeah? That shows you my character, that I didn't lay in bed. I wanted to just lay in bed and not deal with anyone today. Right? That's not 100% untrue. Okay? If we're going to run this race called life, I'm venturing to say all of us want to win. When I ask people, do you want to have a life that has significance and has purpose and has a clear vision? I have never run into anyone that says, no, I just want to have a mundane, boring, purposeless life. If I asked you, do you want to have a life that is significant? No one's like, no, I want it insignificant as I can be. I know that because now I'm not saying that at some point the dings and the dents and the collisions of life haven't sucked that out of you. But at one point, all of us here today had a vision. At some point, all of us today, no matter what age you are, you have something you're pursuing, something you're going after. And what I want us to challenge us today is, I want us to move towards 2020 vision. Isn't that what our eye doctors tell us we should have? 2020 vision, right? 2020 vision gives us clarity of life. I have 2400 vision. No joke. Like my contacts right now, I'm wearing them, obviously, but you hope I am, especially if you're on the highway today. I think I'm minus 5.75 are my contact lens. I'm shooting for double digits. That seems like a really good. Right. So, he gives us these. Now, I have contacts in, so right now I can't even, I see you, Audrey, but you have blurred up quite a bit, okay? These are my glasses. I did that online eye exam, and I got these for $5. My wife said, don't ever wear them in public, but I just did. She's like, why do you do that? How many of you have a blurred vision right now? Or maybe a buried vision. It's blurred, and maybe it's gone past the point of being blurred. It's gotten buried. There's a lot of things that in this world can blur our visions, right? We get distracted. There's a lot of things that are good in this world that can blur our vision, right? We get lost, we get sidetracked, we get focused on the things that really aren't the most important things. So I want to ask two questions today as we continue. Maybe two questions that you want to wrestle with. Number one, how can I have a lasting vision? How can I have a lasting vision for my life? What does, and I'll just write it up here, how can I have, notice I write easy words now after I misspelled presence, okay? Lasting vision. How can I have a lasting vision? And then the other one is this, how can this vision include people? You'll never have a lasting vision if it doesn't include people. You can be like, well, I have a vision, Mark, to become CEO of the company. I have a vision to be a 4.0 student. I have a vision to, get a bigger house. I have a vision to retire early. I have a vision to golf more in retirement early. Right? I have a vision to travel. Those are not going to be lasting visions. Why? I'll answer the question. Because they do not include other people. A lasting vision will always include. Now, here's what's fascinating. Maybe some of you are like, well, how in the world did Caleb's vision include people? the land that Caleb was promised, and then he goes to Joshua and says, hey, it's been 45 years, bud. I want this land. The land that he was being given was a land still in turmoil and still at war. Why I love Caleb. Caleb is 85 years old, and you're like, well, people lived older in the Bible. No, actually, by that time, sin had entered the world and broken a lot of stuff. People weren't living, for centuries and centuries. 85 years old was still not young. 85 years old still meant that he wasn't walking as fast as he used to. He's probably not going to break the 4-minute mile. But yet I just call Caleb a boss. He was a boss. He was a man, okay? He says, I want this land that's been promised to me, even though this land is a very dangerous land. And you see it right there, because he said, I'm going to fight. I'm going to continue to fight. I'm going to continue to battle to see God's promises fulfilled in my life and the lives of the ones under me or in subsequent generations, because I'm an older man now. I have family. I have grandkids. I have great-grandkids. Caleb was focused on the presence of the Lord. He was focused on the promises. He obeyed wholeheartedly, and he had a vision that included people. Makes me think about people here at the Valley who have a vision that's a lasting vision, and a vision centered on people. Jessica Zwolek, our Connections Discipleship pastor, said that in a couple of weeks, Marty and Lee and there's someone else, and then Tess, they're going taking Alpha back into the prisons here in Miami County. If you're new with us at the Valley, Alpha is one of our major vehicles to make disciples who then make disciples. Become disciple makers. Become disciple makers, those who are just passionate about reaching people who don't know Jesus. And so they've been able to go in and tell people about Jesus in the county jail, and they're going back. Going with God's presence, trusting His promises, and we baptized someone last year who heard about Jesus in the jail, and we're not done doing that, by the way. I dream of the day that there's part of this church filled up with people, because hey, guess what? It could have been me, could have been you. Let's just be straight up. Could have been me, could have been you. I don't look and say, man, they're not running the race well, whatever. If I would have grown up in some of the environments, you start hearing the stories, and I do ask for when I start hearing the stories, I'm like, yeah, that would have been me. You better believe it. I would have been the one sitting there in the cell, someone else coming to tell me about Jesus, okay? That we have this place filled with people who have been lost and who are going to be found. Thought of the Gibeonites who use the giftings that God's given them for a healing ministry, literally for a healing ministry that meets here at the Valley. I thought of Danielle, who's going to start an Alpha out in the community. Thought about Rachel, who's using Alpha in a halfway house for people coming out of jail and getting established in the community. I thought of Philip. Philip is using a passion that he has for role-playing games, of all things, to reach autistic children and their family in the community who don't know Jesus. And he texted me the other day, and he's like, I have like 6 kids coming who don't know the Lord, and they would have, and every place else in this world they and their families feel out of place. They don't feel comfortable. But yet he's partnered with Shelley Calvert, and I love birthday parties. Vision includes people. Trusting God's presence, trusting His promises, just being obedient, and then having a vision, a compelling vision. So I'm going to ask you that questions again. How can I have a lasting vision? That's the thing I think we're all wrestling with. How can I have a lasting vision? How can that lasting vision? And I don't care if you're in this room and you're 15, and I don't care if you're in this room and you're 85, it doesn't matter. As long as you and I are here, God has something He wants to do in and through our lives. God's been doing this in my own life. He's been bringing more 2020 vision to me. I don't fall off the stage, okay? For the church, for the Valley Church, not just Troy, but across all our locations. And there's a lot of answers I don't have. There's staffing things I'm trying to figure out. I could go through a list of probably 30 things like that I don't know yet. But I do know this. God's brought me a lot of clarity. We are going to be a church who reaches lost people, starting with the kids. We're going to be a church, because you've heard me say it maybe before, that the church doesn't need a mission, the mission needs a church. The church doesn't need a mission, the mission needs a church. Jesus came and said his mission is to seek, pursue, chase after the lost, to seek and to save those who are lost. So if you're here today and you feel lost, you're at the perfect place. One of our values is come as you are, but you're at the perfect place. We're going to be a church that has 2020 vision of going and reaching lost people. God's expanding my heart. When I'm driving, when I'm at the supermarket, when I'm wherever I am, I start seeing and I see broken. There's a lot of brokenness. I don't even have to ask them if they feel lost. I can see it in their eyes. I can see it in their countenance. I can see it in their countenance. I can see it in their body language. I can just see it. And we're going to pursue. And that's why we talk about Discover You. That's why we have these connection cards. That's why we have them. It's not just to put a nice pocket in the back of the seat. On the back of this, it says, I'm committing my life to Jesus. I pray that every day we gather here, that someone marks, I'm committing my life to Jesus. Put it in the giving box over there. There's one as you leave, too. Someone will reach out. We want to help you on that journey. I'm recommitting my life to Jesus. I'm going to start reading my Bible. I'm going to start serving. It's very straightforward around here. God's brought me that clarity, that 2020 vision. We are going to be lost people. We're going to invite lost people. That's why we're having we're not doing a combined service at the Arbogast Center just to have a couple thousand people for Christmas Eve this year. There's a lot easier ways to do it. We have that building for that night for 2 services, and I want you, and I'm going to invite people who don't know Jesus. That night, there's going to be a lot of people who cross line of faith. They're going to receive the greatest gift they can ever receive, which is the person and presence of Jesus in their life. And Christmas morning will kind of be a letdown of all the gifts they get after that. That's why we have then Discover You, because Discover You has 4 main purposes. Discover who Jesus is. Talk about being baptized, taking one step of obedience. Learn how we're wired with spiritual gifts, and then use those gifts to serve the local church. We're going to serve both here, and we're going to serve out there. I think that's pretty crystal clear. But it's because we're pursuing his presence, we're pursuing his promises, we're going to be as obedient to what he tells us to do, and then we're going to have a vision. Paul says this. He says, therefore, I do not run like a man running aimlessly. I do not fight like a man beating the air. On Monday, I had worked a long day on Monday. I was doing a lot of writing. I like to write. I like to study. I'd done 8 or 9 hours of writing. And I get home, and that uses a lot of, I don't know how many brain cells are left here, but I used whatever was remaining. And I get home, and we got young kids, and I just wanted to veg. I just wanted to go and watch sports. And there was dinner, so I was going to eat, but then after dinner, then dishes. And then after dishes, there's bedtime, and Jess and I are tag teaming that, but I mean, it's 3 hours later. And could we put up a picture of the cat, please? Okay. I walk through our bedroom. We have 2 cats. I walked through the bedroom, and I saw this one. Abby's his name. It's actually a boy. There's a long story to that. I don't have time for, but he's my buddy. He's the one, like this morning at 5 a.m., got up on my chest and was wanting fed and all that fun stuff. And I said to my wife, I said, Jess, there's sometimes I just wish I was a cat. I'm serious. That's the exact words. I walked by the living room. I'm exhausted. I'm tired. We're still not in bed. Well, kids are, you know how that goes if you have kids, right? There's still one, can't pull it off, you know. And I said to her, Jess, some days I just wish I was a cat. I looked at this cat, I'm like, this is the life. 22 hours a day of this. The other 3 hours are eating and using the litter box. And here's why I share that. That thought didn't leave me all week. Because after that, God started nudging me, and he said, I know you love your cat, but that cat doesn't have any vision in life. The cat doesn't have a perfect purpose he's trying to fulfill. And you might be exhausted at 8 o'clock at night. You haven't sat down. You haven't stopped moving. But you just spent your whole day doing what I've called you to do. Those are kids that he called us to adopt. That was writing and research I was doing, not only to prepare for this, but some things on church planting that God's instilled in my heart that I think can be some game changer to reach a lot of lost people. I don't know, that visual just kept in my mind. Yeah, there's some days I do wish I was a cat, but every time that thought now comes to my mind, God reorients it to, no, you have a vision. It's so crazy how he works. He used to sleep in cat on our bed to clarify the calling he's put in my life. And so maybe today you feel like what Paul says here, right? That I'm running aimlessly and I'm beating the air. But I'm going to make a call to you today as we respond in a few moments of what do you need to give over? What do you need to surrender? See, you can only go up in your relationship with God if you give up something. It's true, right? If you and I try to do everything, if we as a church try to do everything, guess what we're going to do? We're going to get really, really, really tired. Spiritual activity, church activity does not lead to spiritual maturity. The irony of all irony is we have to stop some stuff. You might have to stop some stuff in your life. You might have to slow down. You might have to say no to some things to get the clarity of vision that God has for you. We're all in a race, aren't we? We're all going somewhere. Who are you taking with you? No matter what age you are today, God is calling you to run the race well. He's wanting you to have a life that is led by His presence and is built on His promises, that is wholehearted obedience to Him. And He wants to give you and I a vision for our life that involves other people that will have you flying out of bed in the morning. That will have you flying out of bed in the morning to fulfill something so much bigger and so much greater. So we're going to bring back, I'm going to pray. The band will come while I pray, so as not to distract. But we're going to bring back that song, The Goodness of God. And as we were singing it today, this stood out to me. My life surrendered, I give everything to you. My life surrendered, that's what it takes. If He's going to go before you, then you have to give Him the keys of your life. You have to allow Him to have control of your life. My life surrendered. Surrendered, church, is not giving up. We think that's what it means. In scriptural language, it's not giving up, but it is giving over. My life surrendered. I give you everything. My life surrendered. What's 2020 vision look like for you? What if you had such clarity of vision? A life surrendered is a life well led. A life that is wholeheartedly devoted to Him. So we're going to respond today, and maybe that response is you're going to come light a candle as saying, maybe for a person, it's going to represent a person. You can see the different one. We're remembering even the light that Christ has given in your life. We're going to receive communion as we're remembering and to celebrate what He's done in your life. Maybe you just need to kneel at your seat, or you need to kneel over at the bench we have in the corner, or kneel at one of the stairs, or whatever, and just seek His presence. Maybe some of you today need to seek His presence. Maybe some of you today need to trust and beat down the door of His promises. Maybe some of us today need to say, God, you know, I've sinned, I've fallen short, and I want to obey you wholeheartedly. Others of you today are going to need to ask Him for a vision. Others of us today are going to need to ask Him for the courage to live out that vision like we're seeing the Gibbeties and like we're seeing Lee and Marty doing, like we see Danielle doing. And I always hate to say names because I know I'm missing one. Actually, as an aside, if you're doing something to reach lost people, put it on that connection card because I want to know. I want to be praying along with you for the power and for the courage to do what only He can do. So would you stand with me? Don't leave today without responding. Maybe today your response is to let Jesus come into your life. Maybe your response today is to say that I'm all in. But I'm telling you, don't leave today without doing some business with God the Father. Because He wants to give something into your life, a vision into your life that you can't imagine. Would you pray with me? Heavenly Father, I pray that you would meet each person right where they are. I pray that we would have the courage to pursue after you. I pray that we would have the boldness to knock on the door of your promises. I pray that we would be people known for our obedience and pursuing after you. I pray that you would instill in us a vision, a God-sized vision, a dream that only you can fulfill. God, it's not lip service when I say that your word never returns void. So as we respond in this moment, as we remember the goodness of God, as maybe we surrender, as we give things over to you, my prayer has been that each person would have an encounter in these next 5 minutes with God like they've never had before. Come, Holy Spirit, come meet us in this place.